Thank you, Acting President. I rise to make a contribution on this motion from Mr Mulholland, and I've just been overwhelmed by where this discussion has gone in the last few speeches to a sort of global organised crime conspiracy, but we'll come back to that. As just been alluded to, it's 9 months since the opposition last brought a CFMEU motion into this chamber. And in the words of Yogi Bear, I sort of have this feeling of, I think he said, oh no, it's deja vu again. Because it is deja vu again. It is the same stuff that was dragged up in July of last year. I think we're going to cover much of the same ground, except we now have gone to sort of from a Royal Commission into the construction division of the CFMEU, although they just talk about the CFMEU, which is a much bigger entity, as Mr Batchelor alluded to now apparently a Royal Commission into global organised crime and everything in between. First and foremost, let's just get a certain thing that I think we all can agree on, okay? There are deeply, deeply disturbing elements that are correctly identified in this motion that strike to corruption and that strike to violence against women. Both are intolerable. Both are crimes. Both can and should be prosecuted with the full force of the law, however and wherever they occur. I think we can all agree on that basic principle. And then probably we go in different directions. Now, reading this motion, one might get the sense that these crimes are happening in some sort of a legal process vacuum. That 60 Minutes has shown this up, Nick McKenzie's shown this up, and I want to come back to the question of the investigative journalism because it's been outstanding. But that is simply not the case. Currently, we have working on the construction division of the CFMEU, and I would also hope we can agree, apart from the criminal question, that we are talking about the construction division of the CFMEU, not the broader union. I know, and I think that's, we'll come to that as well. I mean, currently we have running Operation Hawk by the Victorian Police. We have Operation Rye, operation by the Australian Federal Police. Well, a lot of this was from my discussion at this time, in last year. We have implementation of the Wilson Review, which made recommendations specifically on Victorian government sites and will be, as I understand it, the subject of forthcoming legislation. We have a very vigorous administration of the Victorian Construction Division of the CFMEU with multiple investigations running off that. We have the Fair Work Commission's ongoing investigation into improper conduct, which is also leveraging off the administrator's appointment. We have the ongoing Fair Work Ombudsman investigations, and there are multiples of those. And then there is also the very real possibility that there are both there are federal and/or state anti-corruption commission investigations, but neither of those agencies are in the habit of making those investigations public until they so choose. Now, there is such a thing as too many cooks in the kitchen, and the opposition is well aware of this. You know, the call for a Royal Commission in this context is, I fear, frankly, theatre. It's mischief, and it's quite possibly something a little more sinister. It is hard not to see that this is basically an opportunity to attack the construction division of the CFMEU, the broader CFMEU, the broader construction industry group of unions, and the trade union movement as a whole. Now, just as outlaw bikie gangs and organised crime will follow the money, as Mr Limbrick quite accurately asserted, so too the opposition is inextricably drawn to its beloved union-busting agenda like flies to excrement. And what is that agenda? Firstly, and we've heard it directly, it's bring back the Australian Building Control Commission, the so-called tough cop on the beat. Their greatest achievements were to actually lower productivity. They did have a few weeks of happiness and some stats that keep on being bandied around, but overall during the period of the Australian Building Construction Commission, productivity on construction work sites went down. They increased workplace deaths and injuries on their watch, and they used to stomp around threatening people with jail terms if they didn't take down union flags. You know, that was the glorious ABCC. And that was at a cost of tens of millions of dollars to the taxpayer. And let's not pretend that this problem in the construction sector is new. A lot of this was absolutely happening on the watch of the ABCC. And what did they do about it? They went after Bill Shorten. Geez, that was good, wasn't it? You know, the reality is that it's the likes of investigative reporters like Nick McKenzie and the other great journos who have worked in this area, not the ABCC, and their army of so-called investigators that have brought this stuff into the light. You know, and let's put that in some perspective. But you still long for the glory days when this army could be deployed under the banner of the ABCC to try and smash unions in the construction sector. Secondly, in terms of the grand plan, there is clearly this intent to deregister unions, you know, to kneecap their ability to organise and to protect workers. And that is an action that is so dumb. It is up there with the Kennett government, with the Kennett government's decision to hand over their industrial relations powers to save some money. And now we still have these sort of like liberal wet dreams about re-regulating industrial relations as though it's not already gone. You know, you've already given it away, and it's not coming back. And you know, I hope you did save some money, because you know it's something you've lost absolutely now. That was just an extraordinary decision. And if you deregister a union, all you do is convert it into an incorporated association, which is far less regulated, far less required to report and be transparent. Well, isn't that just a remarkable achievement? And thirdly, let's face it, at the end of the day, there is still this dream of a golden age, which was the work choices IR law. You know, that's where you want to go back to, you know, to attack wages, to attack conditions, and to attack the safety of all workers. And that's what sits behind this sort of resolution. So we do not support this motion for a Royal Commission. And let's just ponder for a second the history of Royal Commissions that have been deployed by Conservative governments to attack the union movement. I think perhaps the most marvellous example would be the Ships Painters and Dockers inquiry, where, you know, clearly there was a desire to smash the waterfront unions. And where did we end up with? We ended up with bottom of the harbour. Now, that was actually a really good inquiry, and in some ways it lends some veracity to Mr. Limbrick's sort of big picture that is, can I suggest respectfully, far, far, far bigger than anything that the opposition is talking about in their motion. But that's sort of where it went. And in terms of the actual waterfront unions, bugger all, pardon my French. Now, I want to try and end on a positive note. You know, we've already discussed these crimes and the fact that these crimes should be dealt with by the people who are qualified to do that, and that's the police through an investigation. And we also know that there are now a whole lot of agencies who are all having a particular role to play in this process. And we've already discussed the huge, huge amount of change that is already underway in the construction industry. But ultimately, major cultural change is only possible in an industry.
Your time's expired. Thank you. Mr. Burke.